Hi there and welcome. In Victorian England, a Sherlock Holmes-like mouse must solve a toymaker's disappearance to uncover and thwart a more sinister plot that threatens the entire nation's stability. Today, we're going to tell you the story of the Disney classic from 1986, The Great Mouse Detective. During a foggy night in London, inside a tiny mouse-sized store, the toymaker Flaversham gives his daughter, Olivia, her birthday present. What looks like a tiny blossom is actually a dancing princess, much to the girl's delight. Unbeknownst to them, a bat with a peg leg approaches the store as he cackles quite evilly. While a grateful Olivia hugs her father, exclaiming that Flaversham is the best dad in the world, their doorknob suddenly shakes. Someone is attempting to break in. The alarmed toymaker quickly hides his daughter in a cabinet. The window suddenly opens, revealing a horrid-looking bat with sharp teeth. Olivia sees her father being throttled, but then she's shoved back inside the cabinet. When she emerges, the tiny mouse finds herself alone, crying desperately to find her father. On the eve of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, Dr. David Dawson alights from his carriage, having just arrived in London after a lengthy service in Afghanistan. Looking for a place to stay, the doctor walks around when he hears someone crying nearby. Inside a boot, Dawson finds a tearful Olivia, who informs him that she's lost. The girl reveals she's looking for Basil of Baker Street, whom the doctor discovers is a famous detective. As the girl is distraught about her abduction of her father, Dawson promises Olivia to help her find Basil. Later, the two find the detective's residence at 221 Baker Street. At the door, they're greeted by Miss Judson, who tells them that they're welcome to wait for him. The detective's residency is fascinating, filled with experiments and inventions that tickle the curiosity of the little girl. Suddenly, a scary-looking man who's wielding a gun barges into the room. Dawson is alarmed, but it turns out that the weird-looking mouse is Basil in disguise. Olivia launches into the reason for their visit, but the detective is currently preoccupied. When Dawson tries his hand at getting Basil to hear her out, the detective surprises him by correctly guessing his profession and that he was stationed in Afghanistan. Basil demonstrates his great deduction skills before shooting at a pile of cushions. Brushing off Miss Judson's indignant protest, he compares the bullet he just shot with another, but they turned out to be different. Basil is dismayed, as it seems his investigation has come to a dead end. Finding a chance to explain her problem, Olivia starts talking, and finally she captures Basil's attention when she mentions that her father was taken away by a bat with a peg leg. The detective recognizes the perpetrator in question and informs his guest that the bat's name is Fidget, who's currently in the employ of nefarious Professor Ratigan. Basil describes his enemy as an evil genius, and for many years the detective have tried to capture him, each time with Ratigan managing to escape.
Not a corner of London safe, while Ratigan's at large.
Meanwhile, at some remote place, Ratigan is indeed scheming. He's forcing Flaversham to create a device, and he wants it finished by tomorrow evening. Finding his courage, the toymaker refuses to cooperate with Ratigan's monstrous plan and destroys his prototype. However, when Ratigan starts threatening Olivia's safety, Flaversham falters and caves to the villain's demands. Ratigan then hands his minion, Fidget, a list, instructing the bat to get the tools, gears, Flaversham's daughter, and uniforms. Later, at his fancy hideout, Ratigan tells his goons that they're going to embark on the most diabolical scheme of his career. Tomorrow night, with Flaversham's help, he plans to usurp the queen and become the supreme ruler of all mousedom. His men cheer and hail Ratigan as the world's greatest criminal mind. In the middle of the cheering, one of his goons, Bartholomew, who's so drunk he commits a fatal mistake, he calls his boss a rat. Ratigan instantly becomes furious, and while his men try to placate him, saying their friend didn't mean what he said, the evil professor tosses the offending mouse outside and rings his bell, summoning a deadly predator. A big cat appears, to the other mice's horror, and in the next moment, Bartholomew is swallowed whole. His friends mourn while Ratigan praises the cat Felicia. As they're now even more terrified, the evil professor's men continue praising him to his satisfaction. Back at Baker Street, after having extracted every detail of Flaversham's abduction from Olivia, Basil concludes that Ratigan is up to something. He's wondering what the evil professor would want with the toymaker. When Fidget suddenly appears at the window, scaring Olivia, Basil quickly chases after the bat, with Dawson following closely behind. The two mice find prints and, most importantly, a hat, which makes the detective exclaim triumphantly. Making his way back to his residence, Basil reveals that he's going to pursue the bat, who he suspects will lead them to the girl's father. He invites Dawson along, but Olivia wants to accompany them too. The detective refuses to let the girl follow them, stating it's dangerous. However, in the end, Olivia gets her way and she joins the two older men to see Toby, who turns out to be a basset hound. Basil trained the dog himself and he lets Toby sniff Fidget's scent. Immediately, Toby's on the hunt and all of them follow the dog in search for a one-peg-legged bat. Meanwhile, their target is a human toy shop, getting everything on the list except for the girl. Just then he notices Basil and his group arrive, so Fidget quickly packs up and hides. In haste, he loses Ratigan's list. At the same time, Basil finds the entrance that the bat used, impressing Dawson.
Basil, you astound me.
Inside, Dawson and Olivia marvel at the large toys while Basil reminds them to be careful. Suddenly, there is a loud noise, but it's only Olivia having turned on one of the toys. Thoroughly annoyed, the detective instructs Dawson to look out for the girl before continuing his investigation. Finally, he finds Fidget's prints, which lead to an army of bear-looking toy soldiers. While Basil observes that some toys are missing their clockwork mechanisms, Dawson notices a piece of paper on the ground. When the doctor tries to inform the detective this was fine, suddenly many of the toys come to life. As they're distracted, they don't notice that Olivia has wandered away, drawn by the rocking crib. When she peeks inside, the baby turns out to be Fidget, who then captures her. The girl's screams alarm the two men, and quickly they try to rescue her. However, the bat is quite devious, using the many toys around them to aid in his escape. When he realizes the entrance is guarded by Toby, Fidget heads towards a window on the roof, escaping just in the nick of time. Worried, Dawson looks for Basil and finds him entangled in a doll's string. The detective is furious, berating the doctor for not keeping a better eye on Olivia, but he falters when he notices that Dawson is looking terribly sad and guilty. Basil cheers him up, saying that they can still save the girl. While the detective goes into thinking mode, the doctor pulls out the list from his pocket. Upon noticing it, Basil becomes excited, praising Dawson as is a clue that they precisely need. At the same time, Ratigan visits Flaversham, revealing that he has Olivia. He allows the father and daughter to reunite before separating them again. The evil professor tells the toy maker that there shouldn't be any more delays unless Flaversham wants his daughter to get hurt. The poor mouse cooperates while Olivia is imprisoned inside a bottle. Ratigan is initially happy with Fidget's work, but he becomes angry when he hears that the bat lost his list and that Basil is actually on the case. As punishment, the evil professor feeds Fidget to Felicia, but then he comes up with an idea, instructing the cat to let the bat go. Ratigan excitedly contemplates his plan. At Baker Street, the detective is closely inspecting the list that they found. From the piece of paper, Basil is able to deduce a lot of things and even conducts experiments. Finally, he comes to a conclusion, figuring out what they need to do next. With Toby's help, Basil and Dawson find the pub, both wearing disguises. They try to fit in with the suspicious crowd, but the doctor is having a hard time. When a barmaid approaches them, Basil orders themselves pints before asking the woman if she knows where Ratigan is. Instantly, gasp can be heard, and the barmaid obviously lies that she's never heard of the fellow. Just then, the unruly audience quiets down when a pretty white mouse graces the stage. While everyone is captivated by the singer, Basil notices that the barmaid from earlier is whispering suspiciously to the bartender, who then drops some liquid into their drinks. When they're served, the detective is too slow to warn Dawson that their pints are drugged, as the doctor immediately downed his drink. When Basil finally spots Fidget, he turns to his companion, only to discover that he's on stage dancing with the performers. The drunk and drugged doctor causes a fight to break out in the pub. In the middle of the chaos, Basil wakes Dawson, and thankfully the doctor sobers up. Finding a trapdoor, the two mice follow the bat into the pipes, and eventually they find Ratigan's secret lair, where they spot a bottle nearby. And they're excited to see a kid wearing familiar clothes. Basil and Dawson immediately try to help who they think is Olivia, but it turns out to be Fidget in disguise. A cacophony of voices suddenly calls for Basil, revealing that there's a large crowd waiting for the detective to show up. Ratigan is amused, applauding the whole spectacle, and the two arch-enemies exchange barbs, and the detective is quite vicious. The professor mocks Basil, declaring that his superior mind has triumphed now that he's trapped the detective. Basil deflates, allowing the mean laughter from Ratigan and his goons to get to him. As the evil professor doesn't know which method to use for the detective's demise, he decides to use them all. He explains that the moment the song being played on the gramophone ends, both Basil and Dawson will meet their ends. With the detective out of the way and the device ready for the event later, Ratigan and his men leave for Buckingham Palace. Dawson asks Basil what Ratigan is scheming, and a despondent detective gives him the answer. The Queen is in danger. At Buckingham Palace, guests arrive for the Queen's Jubilee, while the monarch is still preparing in her quarters. Unbeknownst to the Queen, her guards have been replaced with Ratigan's men, and they deliver a gift, much to the Majesty's delight. When the faux soldiers open it up for her, the Queen is momentarily fascinated to see a toy replica of herself until it starts chasing her. Realizing that the gift came from Ratigan, the furious Queen instructs her guards to seize the professor, but they all merely laugh at her. Ratigan instructs his goons to take her away while ringing his bell. Back at the lair, the song is nearing to an end, but Basil is too busy feeling sorry for himself, bemoaning that Ratigan has finally outwitted him. Eventually, Dawson has had enough of his moping and gives the detective a piece of his mind.
We're about to be horribly splattered, and all you can do is lie there feeling sorry for yourself. Well, I know you can save us, but if you've given up, then why don't we just set it off now and be done with it?
Something the doctor said inspired Basil. Looking crazed, the detective makes a quick calculation and instructs Dawson to release the triggering mechanism on his signal. Basil's plan works, and the chain of events sets them free. The smug detective grabs his confused companions and smiles for the camera. Back at Buckingham Palace, the toy queen greets the citizens, but it's actually Flaversham who's making the replica move and talk, while the real queen is dragged through the hallway towards an excited Felicia. The fake one introduces Ratigan as her own new royal consort, much to everyone's shock. Meanwhile, Basil enlists Toby's help to get them to Buckingham Palace, and thankfully, they arrive just in time to save the Queen. Ratigan starts abusing his position by imposing ridiculous taxes when suddenly the toy queen changes her tune. The replica declares that Ratigan isn't a royal consort, but a corrupt, low-life scoundrel. Before everyone's eyes, the toy replica self-destructs, which only implicates Ratigan more. Everyone moves to arrest the evildoers, but Ratigan and Fidget escape, taking Olivia with them. Seeing the kidnappers get away in their dirigible, Basil and his companions make their own airship and chase after them. When Fidget tells Ratigan that they need to lighten load, the cruel professor throws the flightless bat overboard instead of Olivia. Basil manages to get to Ratigan's dirigible, but then they crash into Big Ben. Basil finds himself within the large clock's mechanisms. He and Ratigan fight while Olivia almost gets crushed between some gears. Fortunately, the detective saves her and he hands the girl to her father. Ratigan gets a hold of Basil and the two fall on the hour hand and the large clock. The fight resumes with Basil at a great disadvantage. And for the moment, the evil professor believes he's pushed the detective to his death. However, he survives. When the clock strikes 10, the large hand bell sounds, sending great reverberations that make Ratigan lose his balance. He falls, but manages to take Basil down with him. Olivia and his men are saddened, but it turns out the detective is alive, having used part of the dirigible to save himself. In the aftermath, the Queen honors the detective, and Dawson marvels at the fact that they were thanked by the Queen herself. The Flavershams bid their goodbyes and leave for the train home.
Goodbye, Basil. I'll never forget you.
Dawson makes to leave as well, but ends up welcoming a new client as he opens the door. Basil introduces the doctor as a trusted associate to Dawson's surprise. He decides to stay and work on the case, the first of many with Basil of Baker Street.
I shall always look back on that first with the most fondness. My introduction to Basil of Baker Street, a great mouse detective.
So what do you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments, and if you enjoyed this recap, please like and subscribe for more. See you next time.